moment. Read it for us cheerfully. Cheerfully. I don't know how, but
We are reading a message from the book Living Spring, psychographed by Chico Xavier by the Spirit Emmanuel, chapter 70, Loneliness. Pilate asked them, "But what wrong has he done?" They shouted even louder, "Crucify him." Matthew 27:23. As you evolve higher and higher by performing your duty, you experience the loneliness of the heights, and immeasurable sadness afflicts your sensitive soul. Where are those who used to laugh with you in the springtime park of your early youth? Where are the hearts that used to come looking for you in times of wonder? Where are those who used to partake of the bread and the dream with you in the cheerful adventures of the beginning? Of course, they stayed behind. They stayed in the valley, flying in a narrow circle like golden moths that go up in smoke at first contact with the smallest flame that appears before them. There is light all around you, but also silence. Within you, the happiness of knowing, but also the pain of not being understood. Your voice cries out without an echo, and your longing is in vain. Nonetheless, if you really are evolving to a higher level, what ears can hear you from such a great distance, and what heart in need of comfort would readily grasp your lofty ideals? You weep, ask, and suffer. However, what kind of rebirth is not painful? In order to free itself, the bird destroys the cradle of bark in which it matured, and the seed must undergo decay in the ground in order to produce. Loneliness is serving others creates greatness. The bedrock that upholds the plain does so by itself, and the sun that nourishes the whole world shines alone. Do not weary of learning the science of spiritual growth. Remember the Lord, who mounted Calvary with the cross on his wounded shoulders. No one was with him during his gruesome death, except for two thieves being rightly punished for their crimes. Remember him and press on. Do not count the good deeds that you have done for others. Trust in the infinite good that awaits you. Do not wait for others on your journey of sacrifice and spiritual evolution. And do not forget that for his ministry of redemption for all humankind, the divine friend not only lived, struggled, and suffered alone, but was also persecuted and crucified.
let's pray. We're not alone. We are not alone. Thank you, God, for you never forsake us, never. We know Jesus was not alone, but on the earth, he was. Because we, in our misery, in our ignorance, could not see his greatness. But to date, the story repeats itself. In the homes of many, at work, in communities, where many sacrifice to bring the good, and yet they are misunderstood, judged, criticized, brutally. It's okay. You have given us the pathway to life. to the truth, to the immortal being, and we rejoice. Seeing the faces of many spirit doctors, nurses, and therapists who love us dearly and are always with us. We rejoice in their presence. We rejoice in the presence of our protecting spirits and guardian angels, who daily encourage us to the new, to the good, to the best, the divine in us. Thank you for a wonderful day today of glorious news, the good news. May we embrace the invitation and work more without ceasing day and night to bring new hope to the hearts of incarnates and discarnates. With much joy in our hearts, we open this session in your name and love, and so be it. All right, we are going to thank you, Paloma. We have friends over the internet. I hope you guys interact with us too. Okay, I see Narciso who is there, Katia, Lu, Leandro, Slavic, our dear Carol as well. Everybody's dear to us. Stay there and connect, okay? We'll interact with you too, because today the topic is spicy.
What do you call
And
it?
it's not sex, okay? People are thinking sex, no, it's beyond, it's divorce. Oh my gosh. Why do we get married? Just to get divorced. That's bad, huh? You don't get divorced if you get married, so what we're saying. So, divorce is not easy. If it were easy, we wouldn't need a chapter on it. But Emmanuel is simply phenomenal in this chapter. Remember, Emmanuel represents, who is Emmanuel? In science, whenever somebody presents anything, we ask, who are you? Right? We do. You have to show the credentials, right? Who are you? Oh, I'm Einstein. Okay, now I know who you are. But back then, people were like, really? Many people over the years doubted many things he proposed, but science proved every single piece. I'm still working on his theories. But this is not a theory. This is not a point of view. Emmanuel, his credentials is he comes in the name of the Christ, the governance of the earth, to tell us the truth. Vanessa, is it a dogma? You believe it or else? No. But reasoning will tell us if it's true or false. This is not gossip. This is not an opinion. It's not a point of view. It is the truth, the light of the truth. Jesus said, I cannot tell you everything, but I'll send you the promised consoler who will tell you everything I said and more, and the things I cannot say. I need to stay with you till the end of times. It's not a man, it's not a person, it's the message. Emmanuel comes to deliver the message. So today, he's revisiting with us. Last week, it was the beautiful chapter about marriage. Marriage is not about, let's stay together, loving you. No, it's not about that. It's about growing spiritually, creating values and developing values. Today, in this beautiful podcast that comes from Brazil, and we share always, every day at the morning prayer, as much as we can, all of us, in every occasion. But today, they were talking about this creation of values between people when they speak. That's how we create values. When you're sarcastic, for example, they were talking about sarcasm. It's so bad to be sarcastic. We are in a society that think it's so beautiful to be sarcastic, but it's so sour. It attracts bad spirits. And they were talking about how you create values in a conversation. And yesterday, talking to a friend, going hand in hand, mentioning the beautiful works by the Gottman Institute. The Gottmans created an institute to help couples live a better marriage. They have succeeded. They found methods to help couples who want to be helped. Some couples are not helped because they don't ask for help. But those who do and follow through, they succeed. They have books that talk about 7 principles for successful marriage, with exercises. It's not the la la land, it's real. It's research and it works. And this friend was mentioning very beautifully that when they were in an interview, the way the couple, the Gottmans, were talking to each other in this podcast, it was so real because they were talking about how they are good grandparents. One was admiring the skills of each other, which we usually don't do. And that's creating value. When you say, I like the way you do this. And the other say, no, I admire you when you do this. And this is not fake. A couple cannot survive well if they don't have these sweet moments. And this is what we call creating values. These ways that we tease in our society, oh, I don't like your hair, or I don't like this, that's not nice. It's actually bullying. And they say, I'm just kidding. No, that's not kidding. It's bullying. It's bad. And this is where many couples fail. And today we're going to see when divorce happens and how the truth will tell us, yeah, you should divorce because there's no respect. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. Chapter 8, book, Life and Sex, Vida e Sexo. In this book, he begins by quoting always Kardec. In this case, it's the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 12, item 5. There in that book, there is a subtitle talking about divorce. Divorce is a human law. Okay? So nobody's going to burn in hell because it's not God's law. With the purpose of legally separating what is already separated, in fact. It is not contrary to God's laws. Repeat. It's not contrary to God's law, since it merely reforms what humans have stipulated and is applicable only in cases in which the divine law has not been taken into account. Does that mean we should just simply go wild and divorce? No. Stop. Now Emmanuel comes and says, first thing, assuming that there are no marital unions at random, divorce, strictly speaking, should not be facilitated between beings. Our human laws, thank God, already enforce that. It's easy to get married. Just go there, and then boom, you get married. But to divorce, like in Maryland, you have to wait a year to get a divorce. In Virginia, 6 months. In other places, I don't know. I know each state is a story. In Brazil, it's a whole other story. much more complicated. So the human laws are already helping us not to make it easier. It's not supposed to be facilitated. Oh yeah, I don't want it. Okay, go. We go. Sign, done. No. Have to think and reflect and suffer the consequences, because no union is at random. Nobody meets just because, because we were impulsive, because it was one night and then, no, that's what you think, but in reality, that's not true. Nobody attracts themselves to one another, even at a party, just because. There's no chance in the universe. So this is good not only for adults, for teens who say, oh, I just got out. It was just one party thing and the girl got pregnant. No. You didn't know that you guys probably know from another life. And the person who's coming, reincarnating, knows you guys. Well, don't blame anybody, not even you, because God knows better, and that's what you guys need to do now. Find a way to care for this kid and know what to do with yourselves. So when the parents come, how often I hear, oh my gosh, that person is pregnant. Yeah, it's not easy, but a child is always a blessing, though we don't want to do it before the time comes. But if it happens, please, it's never a curse. Mm-mm. Then Emmanuel continues. In marriage ties, we find the opportunity for refinements, reconciliations that take place to the precise sublimation of the soul. Again, marriage is not a walk in the park, and it's not supposed to be. If we dream of it, we are in the wrong school, because the school of marriage is for us to refine ourselves, reconcile. If we are looking for something else, we're knocking on doors that will never be open on earth, because that's what marriage is all about. Even the people who have great affinity, they will find trouble sometimes with the parents-in-law. Maybe they get along well, but then there is a mother, a father-in-law who are always in the way, creating obstacles. So still, reconciliation through the marriage, not only amongst the couple, but the family and the relatives all together, including the children. In 2 chapters, we're going to talk about the children of a marriage. Next week, Emmanuel very kindly will extend the reflection on unhappy unions, so we can understand what to do with them. But today he confirms what he said last week. Marriage is an opportunity for us to grow, creating values, developing values in us. He's confirming. Marriage is actually a meritorious institution. It welcomes in flowers of joy and hope those that life waits for their work of improvement and perpetuation. What is it talking about?
It's easy.
Yeah? Is that easy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You come together, obviously, we talked about it for a reason. And there's always a beauty in your partner, and there's a beauty in yourself. And you work together to extract and learn from those particular traits that person has and the other person has. And it's as you were saying earlier, it's a give and take type of thing. And you may not understand it when you start, but eventually, if you stay at it, it works.
But look what he says, meritorious. What does he mean? It's an institution of merit, meaning it's where we create, we develop, like we construct values. No, but it's not a given. It's a construction. But we love when he says joy and hope. He's also talking about the children who are coming in the way. And they're always, it's so interesting, usually, not all cases, but usually, when people get married and have children, when they're pregnant, they're like, oh, such a happy time. And then you count the days. They're already talking about like when the child is going to go out of the house. They were so excited when the child was in their belly. By the teen years, they're already like, when are you out? When am I going to be by myself? When you're going to be less of a bother? Unfortunately, that happens. But, he says, divine wisdom never institutes principles of violence. Mark it down. Although individuals in many situations aggravate their debts, now they have the faculty to interrupt, refuse, modify, discuss, or postpone temporarily the performance of the commitments that they embrace. Actually, they embrace. What is he saying? He's saying, if the couple says, no, I don't want it, because some people are messing up, and he's going to explain that. They have the faculty. What is faculty here? Yeah?
Ability.
It's kind of an ability, right? Yeah? And there is another aspect to faculty that I want to share. He's talking about this power that you have. You have the power. The ability means the power. You can. You can. You can. We're not saying go divorce, but he's saying God is not violent to say swallow it. You have to stay married although you're miserable. So if you find it otherwise, and he's going to repeat this later. So I find it very funny when I see spiritists being very intolerant regarding divorce. And I've seen people who criticized people who divorced, and later they divorced themselves. Naturally. Because they were criticizing others for what they wanted to do, didn't have the courage. So he says, if in one hand, marriage, let's go back, is about refinement, reconciliation. It's a meritorious institution. On the other hand, if they aggravate their debts, they can interrupt, refuse, modify, discuss, postpone temporarily. But he goes back and forth. We put it on purpose on his order because he has a point here. He goes back and forth, back and forth. Let's see. Just so you see his rationale. He begins with the gospel according to Spiritism, saying it's a human law, separating what's not separated. It's not contrary to God's law. And then Emmanuel says, but it's not a random union. We should not go there and go crazy divorcing, because marriage is for a good purpose, to refine, to reconcile. How else we're going to do it if I only do what I want when I want, and if I don't make efforts to change myself? Sometimes we need that roughness around to really polish us, right? Though it's hard. Marriage may be very meritorious. There are flowers of joy and hope. But when it's not holy, God does not impose anything. But he says before reincarnation, individuals asked for the difficult marriage that they will face, calling to themselves the partner of past existences for the adjustments that will pacify their conscience. They think they are doing a favor to the other. They are doing a favor to themselves. Because in a previous life, we abandoned, we betrayed, we mistreated. And in this life, we are saying, making amends and feeling like, wow, I was able to pacify. In view of the mistakes made at other times. So we asked for it. But he says, we forgot. However, return to the earthly spotlight, reincarnating. They find themselves discouraged when facing the obstacles that lie ahead. So here comes loneliness. It's one of the main things that lead us to divorce. How many people say, I feel lonely in my marriage. I feel misunderstood, just like the message says. I feel this, that, and the other. And feel discouraged, feeling dismay. Now he's going to say, this is the groundbreaking. At times, the partner returns to the exercise of cruelty from another time, be it through contempt, disrespect, violence, or disloyalty. Stop for a moment. Don't read the rest. He said, we planned, we asked. Partner from previous life. And then we get together and we feel discouraged because the person who is with us is back to the same old habits. That's why we abandoned them. We cheated on them. Not justified. But that's why, because they were cruel. How? Now, this is amazing. Because he's not talking about domestic violence in the common sense of the word. He begins by talking in Portuguese. He says, desprezo, contempt. This is cruelty. If you don't look at the person, don't care for what they want, don't talk to them, you give them silent treatment, that's cruelty. You're despising the person. You're putting them down, undermining them, making them feel. Want to read the thing you got, easy? Contempt really is
the feeling that a person is beneath consideration, worthless, deserving of scorn.
Then the person goes and gets a job. You go home happy. And that happens every now and then. This week at the School of Emotion, somebody said, I was so happy I came home. I told my partner. The first question they asked, how much are you going to get? And when they revealed, they said, really? You're going to work for that much? This is disrespect. This is cruelty. And many people break apart because of that. That's cruelty. Disrespect. Any job is a good job.
Especially if it makes you happy.
Especially, you say, it's okay. Violence, and there are different levels of violence, not only physical. There's emotional violence, when you say things that are hurtful. There is, for us spiritists, vibratory violence. You may not, how many times in Verboons describes the woman who was receiving a spiritual blow from her partner. He didn't actually punch her in the face physically, but spiritually he did. For now, it doesn't count as violence. In the eyes of God, it does. Disloyalty, that part we know. We don't need, it's very clear, right? But contempt, disrespect, violence, disloyalty. And then the spouse who was harmed does not always find resources in themselves to overcome the processes of moral harm, dilapidation of which they are victim. It's hard to be in an environment where you're being punched by disrespect, by contempt, by violence, by disloyalty. And then what happens next? Emmanuel is superb in this chapter. He's very considerate. He says, compelled many times to the last frontiers of resistance, it is natural that the husband or wife, look what he says, it is natural that the husband or wife, relegated to undue suffering, make use of divorce as an extreme measure against suicide, homicide, or other calamities that would complicate their fate even more. Or other calamities. How many couples destroy their health because they don't get along? Blood pressure goes up, and then you get cancer because you don't get along. That's a calamity in itself, right? Saving yourself from the trouble of lots of diseases because you need a lot of resistance to face cruelty day in, day out. Especially when you see that harm affecting the children. Not only, but the children too. Obviously, he says it's not right for us to encourage divorce at any time. So you see what he says? It's natural. It's understandable. But he goes back and forth. It's our sole responsibility. Now, this is unique. Sole responsibility to comfort and revive the brothers and sisters in struggle, in marriages of expiation, so that they may overcome their own susceptibilities and afflictions, overcoming the difficult stages of regeneration or atonement that they begged for before their birth on the physical plane in aid of themselves. And that's what people least do. We see couples who are not doing well, and what do? Gossip. They don't get along well. They don't get along well. As if we are like happy couples. Okay. And then we don't help. We don't bring relief. We're not being truly Christians. Not even spiritists. Because we need to help. Bring them what? Relief. How many grandparents know and they help? They help. They go there, see that the marriage is not getting along, and then they go there to help with the kids, to make the friction among spouses less of a struggle. Friends who come and, help in some ways to make it like less uncomfortable. The question is, when we identify this, are we helping, at least with our prayers, or we're just feeling like above everybody else and saying, oh, you see, they have a bad marriage. I have a good marriage. Yeah, I have it, you don't have it. There are people who do this with cars, positions, beauty, fame, and even marriages and children. That's very interesting. The next slides will be just the highlight. He said, we do not encourage divorce, We need to help them to avoid it. But we recognize that slavery does not come from God. Emmanuel, thank you, thank you, thank you. And no one has the right to torture anyone in light of eternal life. No one has the right to torture. He is so skillful in the choice of words. Because remember what he did to Livia 2,000 years ago as a Roman senator. He tortured her with his pride. He despised her. He really felt he was above her. So he's talking from experience. In his case, she succeeded, but she was tortured by him. No wonder he's writing this chapter. It's one of the ways for him to repair his damage to his own conscience. And why does he use the word slavery? Because he's talking about somebody subjecting the other to their cruelty.
Basically what she was a slave.
Exactly, she became a slave. So the question to us, are we enslaving anybody in our marriage? Are we torturing them? Divorce, therefore, based on just reasons, because there are, is a human providence and clearly understandable in the processes of pacific evolution. Meaning, pacify, harmonious evolution. He's talking about an evolution without craziness. Think about homicide, suicide. These families, they are together, but they are always fighting in ways that are brutal to everybody who's around. So, let's read it again. This is a spiritist text. We recognize that slavery does not come from God, and no one has the right to torture anyone in light of the eternal laws. Divorce, therefore, based on just reasons, is a human providence and clearly understandable in the processes of harmonious evolution. Then he goes back. Effectively, Jesus taught, do not separate what God has joined together. And it's not our place to interfere in the life of any spouse in order to relieve them of the obligation to which they are trusted. So we cannot tell people unless their life is at stake. If somebody comes to us and say, oh, they're being physically abusive, of course we have to say, you have to take care of your life. You can't say, oh, but think of God and pray. No, I would go to the police. I would turn the person to the police, period. It doesn't take 2 times. It's just 1. You're violent, and I know, I'll tell you. I'll turn you to the police. If I know, don't tell me, because if I know, I will. If I have the proof, of course. But if you know, and it's happening to you, go to the nearest police station, and that's it. There's no marriage where there's no safety. But we cannot tell, besides that point, we cannot tell anybody, yeah, there's a sound, right? The microphone here. There's like this white sound, like, I think. Is it because it's too? Yeah, I think it comes. I think it's better, right? So, but we cannot tell, okay? So if friends come and say, oh, it's hard, why don't you divorce? Don't do that. We can't. But if they desire separation from each other, that's how he ends the chapter. And we have standing ovation for him. It's our obligation to respect their free choice without harming their decision. Amen. Congratulations. Because in this chapter, he's saving many lives, sparing them from unnecessary guilt, and from being very clear that the choice of separation and divorce is of the couple. Nobody can say anything. And we cannot interfere. And if we're experiencing a form of slavery, emotional, financial, however it is, then don't put up with the torture. Take care of your life. Help. He's asking our community to help the couples who are going through these tough times. And as we go back, this is the most compelling part of the chapter, inevitably, because he's saying, when one of the partners are under a certain amount of suffering, making them feel like there's no escape, I'm going to commit suicide or homicide or other catastrophic measures, let us help them out, understand that there are solutions that are less harmful than that, and divorce is one of them. And as we go back all the way to make sure we understand that this is where the cookie crumbles. Huh? If we want to fix marriage, let's not go back to old conditions. That's why we need therapy, and the therapy of the gospel is always the best. That's why our children need to be raised in ways to be good spouses tomorrow. Because if we let them be disrespectful today, violent today, cheaters today, in school, they will potentially be terrible spouses. And we'll suffer together with them. Because rarely we'll see them in their marriages, divorces, and be happy. And we'll suffer seeing our grandchildren going through the trouble. And then it's going to be our turn to reincarnate. And then everything we didn't teach them, the void will come back to us when we reincarnate. In that absence of spirituality, absence of values, absence of love, absence of kindness. At the end of the day, we're talking about the presence of cruelty, the presence of violence, the presence of forms of impositions and authoritarianism that are very difficult to deal with. So don't be discouraged. There are choices. We asked for them. We have help. But we have choices to interrupt, to refuse, to modify, to discuss. That's a good option. Discuss. Don't need to go to extremes. Some people don't know how to talk, and they say, I'm out. I'm out. Hey, talk. Between in and out, there are many things. Postpone. And remember, marriage is a school. Either we learn it today, or we'll have to learn it tomorrow inevitably. Because that's the end goal of it all. Either we refine ourselves and become better, reconcile, or we'll have to deal with it some other time. In the school of life, there are grades. If you don't pass this grade, we have to repeat the grade until we go to. That doesn't mean we're the same person. Some people think, I'm gonna come back with the same stuff. No, something equally or a little worse. Don't want to see what is worse. But we need to give ourselves an opportunity to meditate on the blessings of marriage and the unique opportunities we're having here. But remember, before life and death, divorce is better. Don't take your life. Don't take anybody's life. Call the quits before, but it shouldn't be facilitated. We would like to open for some highlights amongst ourselves and potential questions. If there is anybody who would like to share anything.
I was thinking of Livia in how they she held together for whatever many years, 20 years, under the content 25. But she elevated and ascended and never had to come back and relive whatever with Emmanuel. But he had to fulfill his part of the mission one way or another. So I really like that, the reflection that our ascension is not totally connected. We have a mission together, but if it doesn't happen together, it can also happen separate ways.
Exactly.
So it's not like we are doomed, right? We're not doomed.
It's not her fault.
It's not her fault, and she did her best. She fulfilled her part. He didn't do his. She went all the way up, and I guess 2,000 years later, he sees her here and there. Right? I think he's allowed now to see Livia. But...
That's so true, Paloma. That's a wonderful point. Though the context is very different. At a time when it was common for women to be submissive, to not have to work, not have a position or anything. So, in a way, but it was hard, anyhow, to be misunderstood, to be slandered so brutally. Like, she was not lonely because she had a wonderful friend named Anna. She was not alone. She didn't succeed on her own. And she became a true Christian. That's the secret.
Yes.
The therapy of the gospel is the secret. But you're right. Though their marriage then was not harmonious after some time, she ascended. And that's interesting because you don't have to check that box because what the other person does is their problem, not yours. And that's a very good point, because many of us feel guilty that the other partner is not on the same page. And we feel like, but that's what we call being omnipotent. We think we're like gods. And if people are not just like us, then we failed. But God is always providing and He doesn't impose Himself. And He's not a failure because we fail.
So, if you are, it's necessary, probably. It's necessary for you and your spouse to come together in a particular lifetime. And then you have your differences. How you handle that separation and divorce can really be a bonus, or it can be negative. If you both can handle that separation politely and lovingly, then you have this beautiful relationship still exists.
Exactly. But if you divorce and you continue to disrespect in your mind, to feeling that the other person is less than you, then you divorce and you continue to do wrong to that person. Continue putting that person down. But if otherwise, as you said, you separate, you divorce, but then you find common ground to raise a child together, or to continue in harmonious ways without holding grudges, then I guess we succeeded, because the goal of life is not to stay married, but to be reconciled with the person.
That's the way I looked at, especially my first marriage,
Right?
because it was so important that our son didn't decide that he had anything to do with us separating. And even though we tried, I'm sure he still felt a little bit that way, but didn't know anything. And I was able to visit, even though they moved to Chicago.
But you had a relationship.
Yes, I still have a relationship with him.
There you go. And you remarried and you're still friends. And that's great. I think that's success.
That's the way I look at it.
Right?
I think she does. Her husband, or now her husband, he always gets a kick out of me because I tell him I love him. He just
Oh.
so initially it threw him for a loop, but now he understands.
That's nice. That's a good example. Some people doubt that it's possible. And I would say in some cases, it is difficult to have this harmonious relationship. So sometimes it's best just to stay far away and apart, just to end the battles. But we need to conquer good grounds in our heart and say, we bless the past, that relationship. We bless that marriage that we had. Like the many marriages we had in previous lives. We had spouses, where are they? I have no idea. Maybe they are here with us today, maybe not. Certainly we have not married and remarried to the same person all these lives. So we had other spouses. It's mind-blowing when we think about it. And did we succeed or not? Maybe in some cases, maybe not. And here we are in the school of marriage. And sometimes we abused so much the school of marriage that now it's hard to be married. Because in previous lives we were married out of conveniences. And now we have to really make an effort to find the one, because in previous lives we didn't care. We cared about the money, the position, the comfort. And now it's hard. The same for those who want to have children. And we abused. God granted us opportunities. We didn't. We committed abortions. We have daughters do the same. And now in this life, we have to do a lot of sweat to value the experience and to say, I'll never, ever, ever do this again. But then if you vote for a political candidate that has a platform for abortion, we're still creating room for problems. Because in certain countries, it may become a mindset in the country, like in Brazil, for example. We say to people, we do not vote for people who have that platform. Because we know better that abortion is a no-no. So if a candidate, no matter the name, is pro-abortion, in the US it's a little different. Like our president, he is a Democrat, but he's not pro-abortion. And if he has a vice president that is pro-choice, pro the freedom of the woman, not necessarily pro-abortion, pro-choice. We know that when it comes to the states have a voice and it's not going to impact the federal. Unlike countries like Brazil, that when the president says, it creates a national mindset. Though we have a Congress to vote, but it's very different. You can change generations to come. So our responsibility, especially for those who want children and care for children, we should not vote. And this is not a political statement. It's a spiritist statement. If we're truly spiritists, we're not pro-legalization of drugs, for example. If a candidate says, we want to legalize it, not us. It's a house of madness if we allow drugs to be sold just like that, just like alcohol. So the therapy of the gospel tells us today, what if we could summarize it together? Number one, do not make divorce easy. Do not incite people to divorce. And yeah, you should do it. But it's understandable. We should support the couples who are struggling. We should understand their decision and not criticize. And if people are feeling abused, enslaved, misunderstood, mistreated, disrespected, etc., 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 it's totally understandable. Nobody's going to burn in hell because they're divorced. These are wonderful news. Today we have more good news than ever. Can you imagine? Finally, more than 2,000 years later, Jesus makes a case in English. It's the first time in English that this book comes to life. This chapter being broadcasted, and it's going to stay there so people can listen and re-listen and feel liberated, feel empowered to live well, to live at peace, and get out of these battles, get out of their subjugation. Talking about subjugation, it's a type. When he talks about slavery, it's subjugation. When we're subjugating somebody, because I have the power. In the Medium's book, chapter 23, about obsession, it's a form of obsession. An incarnate can do that to a discarnate. I've heard people coming to me and saying, my ex-husband said that he's going to destroy me because we're divorced. So congratulations that you made a decision, because that's not a good husband at all. Or the wife said she's going to wipe out everything. Congratulations, that's not a good life either. So there are cases in which it's hard, and I would say at least we need to pray today for all the people who are going through the hardship of divorce, because it's one of the hardest things on earth. The hardest things. There's always guilt, judgment, loneliness. It's one of the hardest things after abortion, because it's rare when you see people who divorce not ending up into feelings of guilt, of failure, etc., or being criticized, treated differently, and especially when there are children involved. It's so hard. If a marriage is not easy, at times a divorce can be even harder. So, are we ready to meet the Christ and thank Him for Emmanuel's message? Thank Him for this empowerment. Just double checking. Thank you, friends. at class, a plataforma de oração. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Ms. Rina. So now, let us then ask our dear Daisy to help us. Okay, Daisy, with the passage prayer. Yes, we're gonna keep connecting with the Christ to receive what we need.
So friends, we now invite everyone to close our eyes. And let us keep this image of Master Jesus right in front of us. Let us visualize his kind eyes, gentle smile, and his warm embrace. Let us visualize that we are at this very moment being embraced by Master Jesus himself. Let us melt into his arms and let us relieve any feelings of guilt, of remorse, feelings of desperation, anxieties. Master Jesus knows exactly what we are going through at this very moment. Let us feel that from his heart, a beam of light envelop each and every one of us. And this light brings us consolation, brings us trust that he is by our side, brings harmony into our lives, and the certainty that we are children of God. As we receive this treatment by Master Jesus himself, let us also visualize that this light coming from his heart now expands, and it envelops those in our lives, those who we need to reconcile, maybe current partners, previous partners, even partners from previous lives. Let us visualize they are being showered by this light, whenever they are, incarnate or discarnate. And as we reflect on tonight's study, we raise our thoughts. Dear Master Jesus, we feel so blessed that tonight you brought us this therapy of the gospel through the blessed hands of Chico Xavier by our dear Emmanuel. This medicine that pacifies our hearts, that brings consolation to so many hearts on earth, going through all forms of cruelty in their relationships, physically, verbally, emotionally. We pray, Master Jesus, for all marriages on earth, especially those who are at this very moment going through moments of challenge, difficulties, and those who are going through divorces or have gone through this experience. Tonight we learn with you to release all forms of guilt, knowing that we are still loved by you and you guide us forward. Dear Master Jesus, we pray for all children also from these relationships, that they can be shielded, knowing that they are loved, that they can also receive your loving hug, and that all families on earth can at this very moment feel your presence, knowing how our families and our homes are sacred places for our children also to grow and for themselves to have harmonious relationships themselves. And with much gratitude in our hearts, we pray that these moments can continue being of healing during this evening, that we can all be taken to schools in the spiritual realms, so that we can learn and fortify all our relationships, and trusting in your guidance today and always, Master Jesus, and keeping this encounter with you in our hearts, we ask your permission to end this meeting of tonight. And so be it. Friends over the internet, we thank you all for being here with us tonight. And we wish you a lovely day or evening whenever you are.